The soft glow of the laptop screen cast a warm circle of light in the otherwise dim room, a small island of peace in a house that often felt like a turbulent sea. This room, tucked away at the end of the upstairs hallway, had become our entire world, my world and Amia's. I sat hunched over my graphics tablet, the stylus a familiar extension of my own hand, trying to coax a new logo into existence for a client who wanted something that felt both vintage and futuristic. It was a puzzle I was happy to lose myself in. Across from me at a small desk, we had wedged between the closet and the wall. Amia was just as focused. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, her pencil scratching softly against the paper of her math homework. At 11 years old, she had a seriousness that sometimes startled me, a quiet resilience that was all her own. Her dark curls fell across her face, and I resisted the urge to reach over and tuck them behind her ear, not wanting to break her concentration. This was our sanctuary. The walls were covered in her drawings, vibrant splashes of color and imagination, and my design proofs. It was cramped, our lives packed into these four walls, but it was ours. It felt safe. The quiet was shattered by the creak of the door opening. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. My mother, Patricia, had a way of entering a room that made the air grow thick and heavy. Still staring at that little screen, Kenna. Her voice was smooth, but laced with a familiar sharp edge of disapproval. "I hope they're paying you enough for all that staring. It must be so tiring." I forced a tight smile and looked up. "It's work, Mom, just like any other job." She waved a dismissive hand, her eyes scanning our small space with a look that made me feel like we were squatters. "Of course, dear. Your little drawing hobby. It's good that you have something to keep you busy." She then turned her attention to Amia. "Amia, sweetheart, are you still doing homework? When I was your age, I was outside playing, getting fresh air, not cooped up in a stuffy room all day. It's not healthy." Amia looked up, her expression clouding over with confusion. "But you told me I couldn't go to the park today because it might rain." Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "A mother just wants what's best for her grandchild. I'm only trying to help your mother see what you need." She glanced back at me, her gaze lingering on the tablet. "Your brother Jordan just closed another big real estate deal. He's taking us all out to that fancy steakhouse downtown to celebrate this weekend. He knows how to provide for his family. He's a real man." The comparison hung in the air, a poisoned dart aimed right at my heart. It always came back to Jordan. Jordan, the successful son. Jordan, the one who had a proper career, a big house, a life that my mother could brag about. And then there was me. The widowed daughter who had to move back home, the artist with a hobby. The sting of her words sent a jolt through me, and for a fleeting moment the room faded. I wasn't there anymore. I was standing in the kitchen of our old apartment, the one that still smelled faintly of sawdust and fresh paint. Marcus was leaning against the counter, a wide, easy smile on his face, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He was covered in a light dusting of flour because he tried to make pancakes for Amia and had somehow managed to get it everywhere. "It's a masterpiece," he had said, gesturing to the slightly burnt pancake on the plate. A culinary triumph. I remembered laughing so hard I cried a pure, uncomplicated joy that felt like sunshine. He saw my art not as a hobby, but as a gift. He was the one who bought me my first professional tablet, telling me my talent was too big to be confined to sketchbooks. His belief in me was a fortress. When the car accident took him from us 2 years ago, that fortress crumbled to dust. Moving back into my childhood home wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. I swallowed my pride for Amia, telling myself it was a temporary arrangement, a stepping stone to get us back on our feet. I thought my family would be a safety net. I never imagined it would feel like a cage with my own mother as the warden. My focus snapped back to the present as Patricia walked over to Amia's desk and picked up one of her drawings. It was a picture of a winged tiger flying over a city made of candy. "This is creative, Amia, but you should really be focusing on more practical things, like your math. Your mother's artistic path is not one you should follow if you want to be successful." She placed the drawing down, but not before her thumb thumb smudged a corner of the crayon. It was a small, careless gesture, but it felt deliberate. It felt like an erasure. Patricia ruled this house with an iron will disguised as loving concern. She decided what we ate when we did laundry, how loud the television could be. She treated me not like a 32-year-old woman, a mother myself, but like a troublesome teenager she was forced to tolerate. Every decision I made for Amia was second-guessed. Every success I had in my freelance work was minimized. It was a constant draining battle for autonomy in a space that was supposed to be a refuge. My brother Jordan was her willing accomplice. He'd visit on Sundays, walking through the house like he was inspecting a property he was considering selling. He'd barely acknowledge me, but would make a great show of slipping Amia a $20 bill, a grand gesture that was more about displaying his own success than genuine affection. I knew he saw us as a burden. I'd overheard him on the phone with my mother in the hallway one night. "How long are they going to stay?" "Mom?" His voice was a low, impatient hiss. "It's been 2 years. It's getting embarrassing. My friends ask who's living in the old upstairs room, and I have to make excuses." My mother's reply was soft, but I heard every word. "Patience, son. We just have to be patient. We have to do what's right for the family." But whose family was she talking about? It certainly didn't feel like mine. As she finally left our room, leaving behind a chill that had nothing to do with the weather, I looked at Amia. She had picked up the smudged drawing, her small finger tracing the blurred line of the tiger's wing. She didn't say anything, but I could see the light in her eyes had dimmed. In that moment, I felt a fierce, protective anger surge through me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about the slow, methodical chipping away of my daughter's spirit. The foundation of our life here wasn't just Mongman, it was cracking right beneath our feet, and I knew with a terrifying certainty that it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. The meeting at the city library had gone better than expected. The client, a man launching a new brand of organic coffee, loved my preliminary designs. For a couple of hours, I was just Kenna Washington, graphic designer. Not a widow, not a daughter living under her mother's roof, but a professional, competent, and in control. We shook hands, and as I packed my laptop, a sense of cautious optimism began to bloom in my chest. It was a feeling I hadn't had in a long time. But then, I glanced out the tall library window. The sky, a placid gray just an hour ago, had turned a bruised, angry purple. A sudden downpour was lashing against the glass, the wind whipping the trees into a frenzy. My heart gave a little lurch. Amia. Her school let out 45 minutes ago. She should have been home by now, safe and dry. I quickly sent her a text. "Hey, sweetie, home yet? It's raining pretty hard." A minute passed. Then another. No reply. I told myself not to panic. She was probably reading a book, lost in another world. I started walking towards the exit, my pace quickening with each step. My phone finally buzzed. It was a call, not a text. When I saw Amia's name on the screen, the fragile bubble of optimism inside me popped, replaced by a cold, slithering dread. "Amia, honey, are you okay?" Her voice was a small, thin thing, nearly lost in the sound of the wind and rain. "Mommy?" She sobbed, a wave of shivering panic in her tone. "The key won't work. I tried and tried, but it won't go in. I can't get in the house." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Every sound in the library lobby, the quiet hum of conversations, the beep of a book being scanned faded into a dull roar in my ears. All I could hear was my daughter's terror. "Where are you right now, baby? Tell me exactly where you are." "I'm on the porch," she cried. "I've been waiting for a long time." "It's so cold, Mommy. I'm all wet." A fury unlike anything I had ever known surged through me, hot and sharp. It was so intense it almost took my breath away. I forced it down, burying it under a layer of calm I did not feel. My daughter needed me to be calm. "Okay, sweetie. Don't you worry. I want you to sit on the bench as far under the roof as you can get. I'm on my way. I'll be there super fast. I love you." I hung up and ran a rushed apology tumbling from my lips as I bumped into someone on my way out the door. The drive home was a blur of slick roads and smeared traffic lights. The windshield wipers fought a frantic, useless battle against the deluge. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. My mind was a chaotic storm of questions. Did she lose the key? Did it break? But a darker suspicion was already taking root, a cold, hard knot of certainty forming in the pit of my stomach. My mother hadn't mentioned anything about a broken lock this morning. When I finally turned onto our street, my worst fears were realized. The porch light was off, leaving the front of the house in near darkness. And there, huddled on the top step, was a small, miserable shape. It was Amia. Her bright pink backpack, usually a beacon of cheerfulness, was soaked a dismal shade of maroon. Her head was bowed, her small shoulders shaking uncontrollably. She looked so incredibly small, so vulnerable, abandoned on the doorstep of the only home she had. A quick glance at the car's clock told me the horrifying truth. It was nearly 8 o'clock. School let out at 3. She had been out here alone in the pouring rain for 5 hours. 5 hours. The number echoed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow against my heart. In that instant, something inside me shifted. The panic and the fear were burned away by a white-hot rage. A rage so pure and cold, it felt like ice in my veins. I parked the car haphazardly and ran to her, scooping her limp, shivering body into my arms. She was ice cold to the touch. She buried her wet face in my neck, her small body trembling violently. I called Grandma's phone, she whispered, her voice hoarse, and Uncle Jordan's. They didn't answer. I held her tighter, my own body a shield against the wind. I carried her to the front door, the very door that had denied her entry, and I began to knock. Not a frantic, pleading knock. It was a heavy, deliberate, resounding sound. Each knock was a declaration. You will answer for this. After what felt like an eternity, the lock clicked and the door swung open. My mother, Patricia, stood there, bathed in the warm light of the hallway. Her hair was perfectly in place. She wore a comfortable-looking robe. She looked at me, then her gaze flickered to the drenched child in my arms, and her expression remained utterly, unnervingly blank. Behind her, my brother Jordan hovered in the entryway, his eyes darting everywhere but at me. Why did you change the locks? My voice was low, dangerously steady. I didn't recognize it as my own. Patricia looked at me as if I were a stranger asking for directions. There was no surprise, no guilt, not even a flicker of concern for her granddaughter. Her words were calm, measured, and delivered with the chilling finality of a judge's sentence. You and your daughter don't live here anymore. There was no explanation, no argument, no apology, just a statement of fact. The air crackled with the things left unsaid. I looked at my mother's cold, impassive face. I saw the cowardly retreat in my brother's eyes. And then I looked down at Amia, who was clinging to me as if I were the last piece of solid ground on earth. The urge to scream, to curse them, to demand an answer for their monstrous cruelty was a physical thing, a wild animal clawing at the inside of my throat. But I swallowed it all down. I swallowed the rage and the heartbreak. My daughter did not need to see me break. She needed to see me stand. So I held her tighter, straightened my back, and met my mother's icy gaze one last time. I gave her nothing. No tears, no begging, no weakness. Without another word, I turned my back on the warm, brightly lit house. I turned my back on the only family I had left. Holding my daughter close to my heart, I walked away from the closed door and stepped back out into the relentless, cleansing rain, leaving my mother and brothers standing in the stunned silence of my departure. The sign for the Sleepy Hollow Motel flickered weakly against the stormy sky, two of its letters dark and lifeless. It was the first place I saw on the highway out of town, a lonely outpost against the night. The room the clerk gave me smelled of stale cigarette smoke and pine-scented cleaner, a combination that did nothing to mask the underlying scent of transient sadness. The wallpaper was a faded floral pattern peeling at the corners, and the brown shag carpet was worn thin in a path from the door to the bed. It was a room meant for forgetting a place where people disappeared for a night. But for us, it had to be a beginning. Amia was quiet as I peeled off her wet clothes and wrapped her in a towel that was thin and scratchy, but thankfully clean. I turned the shower on, letting steam fill the small, cold bathroom. As she washed, I ordered a pizza from the only place that delivered this far out, my voice sounding strangely normal, as if this was just another Tuesday night. I found the one cartoon channel on the small television and turned the volume up, a desperate attempt to fill the oppressive silence with something cheerful and mindless. When Amia came out of the bathroom wrapped in the motel's other towel, her face was scrubbed clean and some of the color had returned to her cheeks. "This is kind of like camping, huh, Mommy?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. My heart ached with a love so fierce it was a physical pain. I forced a bright smile. "Exactly like camping. It's our secret adventure. Just you and me. And tonight we have a special adventure rule. We get to eat pizza in bed." Her eyes widened, a genuine spark of delight chasing away some of the shadows. That was my Amia, always looking for the silver lining. We sat cross-legged on the lumpy bed with its questionable polyester comforter, the cardboard pizza box between us, and watched cartoons about a talking dog. I made jokes. I listened to her talk about school. I acted as if this was the most normal thing in the world. I built a fortress of normalcy around her brick by painstaking brick, a shield to protect her from the cold, hard truth of what had just happened. For those couple of hours, I was just her mom, and she was just my little girl. We were safe. We were together. After she finally drifted off to sleep, her small body curled up in the middle of the strange bed, I tucked the thin blanket around her shoulders. The sounds of the cartoons were gone, replaced by the relentless drumming of the rain on the roof and the rumble of trucks on the nearby highway. The fortress I had built for her crumbled, and the silence rushed in, bringing the flood with it. I sank into the lumpy armchair in the corner, the worn fabric rough against my skin, and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of it all. The facade of the strong, capable mother shattered into a million pieces. I was homeless. My daughter was sleeping in a cheap motel room because her own grandmother, her own uncle, had locked her out of her home and left her in a storm. The betrayal was a physical thing, a shard of ice lodged deep in my chest. How could they? How could a mother do that to her child? How could a brother stand by and watch it happen? The image of Amia's small, shivering body on the porch flashed in my mind again and again, each time a fresh wave of agony and rage washed over me. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold myself together, but a choked sob escaped my lips. The tears came then, hot and silent. They were tears of grief for the family. I thought I had tears of fury for the cruelty they had shown, and tears of sheer terrifying panic for the future. I had a few $100s in my bank account. My latest client invoice wouldn't be paid for another 2 weeks. We had nowhere to go. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a vast, dark abyss with my daughter's hand in mine, and the ground was crumbling away beneath my feet. I was her only protector, her only provider, and I was failing her. The weight of that responsibility was crushing, suffocating. I felt utterly and completely alone. I must have sat there for hours, lost in that spiral of despair. The rain eventually softened to a light drizzle. In an effort to do anything productive, I retrieved our few belongings from the car. My laptop bag, Amia's school backpack, and one other duffel bag I had the foresight to pack with a change of clothes and our important documents. As I began to sort through the files, my hand brushed against something hard and wooden at the bottom of the bag. I pulled it out. It was a small, polished mahogany box, simple and unadorned. My father's box. He had given it to me a few weeks before the cancer finally took him. He was frail, his voice a reedy whisper, but his eyes were as clear and kind as ever. "Kenna," he had said, pressing the box into my hands, "there are things in here for you. Don't open it now. Keep it safe. One day you might find yourself in a situation where you feel like all the doors are closed. When that day comes, when you truly need it, you open this." At the time, I thought it was just a sentimental gesture, a final gift from a dying father. I had put it away, and in the grief that followed, I had almost forgotten about it. My fingers trembled as I lifted the small, unlatched lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded blue velvet, was a thick manila envelope and a smaller, personal-sized letter with my name written on the front, in my father's familiar, elegant script. I opened the letter first. "My dearest Kenna," it began. "If you are reading this, then I fear a day I always hoped would never come has arrived. I love your mother, but I was never blind to the bitterness that took root in her heart long ago. It is a poison, my child, and I am so sorry that you and Jordan were raised in its shadow. I always saw the strength in you, the same quiet resilience my own mother possessed. Your brother. I'm afraid learned to bend to the will of the poison because it was easier. I have worried for many years what would happen to you after I was gone, how you would navigate her world without me there to temper it. That is why I took certain steps. I could not change your mother's heart, so I did what I could to protect your future. In the envelope, you will find the legal deed to the house on Elm Street. It is yours. It has always been yours from the moment I signed the papers. I set up a trust, and upon my death, the ownership transferred directly to you. Your mother was given lifetime residency, a right to live there until her passing. But that right comes with conditions. It is a legal privilege, not an absolute power. The most important condition is that she cannot under any circumstances obstruct or deny the rightful owner you from your own right to reside in your property. She cannot lock you out, Kenna. If she ever does, she forfeits her right to live there. It's all in the legal document. Our lawyer, Mr. Hemlock, has the original copies. He knows my wishes. I did this not to cause a fight, but to give you a key. A key that no one, not even your own mother, could take away from you. Be strong, my daughter. Protect your home. A home is where love resides, not bitterness. I love you always. Dad. I read the letter once, then twice. The words swam before my tear-filled eyes, but this time they were not tears of despair. A single, powerful wave of clarity washed over me, clearing away the fog of panic and fear. I was not a victim. I was not helpless. My father, my quiet, gentle father, had seen this coming. He had known the darkness in my mother's heart, and had forged a shield for me from beyond the grave. He had given me a key. He had given me a weapon. The profound love behind his actions, the foresight, the quiet protection, it filled me with a strength I thought I had lost forever. The shivering stopped. The feeling of drowning subsided. I looked over at my sleeping daughter, her face so peaceful in the dim light of the motel room. She deserved a home. She deserved safety and stability. She deserved to live in a place governed by love, not resentment. My father had given me the means to provide that for her. The anger was still there, a cold, hard ember in my gut, but it was no longer a destructive wildfire. It was now a focused, controlled flame. It was fuel. I carefully placed the letter back in the box, my movements no longer hesitant but precise and deliberate. The night of tears was over. The morning of action was about to begin. The sun was just beginning to cast a watery gray light into the motel room when I woke up. For a moment, I was disoriented, the unfamiliar ceiling and the faint smell of disinfectant confusing my senses. Then the memory of the previous night crashed down on me cold and heavy. But this time, something was different. The crushing despair was gone, replaced by a quiet, steely resolve that hummed just beneath my skin. I looked at the mahogany box sitting on the nightstand, a silent testament to a father's love. It was my inheritance, not a house, not a document, but a path forward, a weapon. I waited until Amia was awake and settled with a bowl of cereal I'd bought from a nearby convenience store, her attention captured by the morning cartoons. Then I stepped outside into the damp morning air, the legal documents from the box clutched in my hand. I found the name in my father's letter, Arthur Hemlock, attorney at law. A quick search on my phone gave me the number. My finger hovered over the screen for a second, a final moment of hesitation. This was it, the moment I declared war on my own family. I thought of Amia's shivering body, and I pressed the call button. His office was in an old, respectable brick building downtown, the kind with polished brass fixtures and floors that creaked with history. Mr. Hemlock was an older man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a gentle demeanor that immediately put me at ease. He remembered my father well. A good man Robert was, he said, his voice warm with genuine fondness. A man who thought of everything and everyone. His words were a balm to my raw nerves. I sat across from his large oak desk, a cup of hot tea he'd insisted on warming my cold hands. I told him everything. I started with Marcus's death, the financial struggles, the difficult decision to move back home. I described the 2 years of biting comments from my mother, the passive aggression, the slow erosion of my confidence. Then I told him about yesterday. I recounted the story in a low, steady voice, detailing Amia's frantic phone call, the 5 hours she waited, the sight of her huddled and soaked on the porch. I told him my mother's exact words. "You and your daughter don't live here anymore." As I spoke, I watched his kind expression slowly harden his brow, furrowing with a quiet indignation on my behalf. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. I pushed the mahogany box across the desk towards him. "My father told me to open this when I needed it," I said. He opened the box and took out the letter first, reading it slowly. A sad smile touched his lips. "Just like Robert," he murmured, "always playing chess when everyone else was playing checkers." He then carefully examined the deed and the accompanying trust documents. He read through them, his eyes sharp and focused, occasionally nodding to himself. After several minutes, he looked up at me, his gaze direct and serious. "Kenna, your father was a very wise man. What he created here is legally airtight. This isn't just a simple will. It's a revocable living trust, and he laid out the terms with impeccable clarity." He leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. "Let me explain this simply. Your mother was granted what's called a life estate. This gave her the legal right to live in the property for the duration of her life. However, and he raised a single finger for emphasis, your father included a very specific, very powerful condition. Her right to residency was entirely contingent upon her never impeding or obstructing your right as the legal owner to also reside there. The moment she changed those locks with the intent to exclude you, the moment she verbally told you that you no longer lived there, she fundamentally violated the core condition of the trust. In the eyes of the law, she didn't just break a rule. She effectively took her lifetime past, tore it into pieces, and threw it away. Her right to live in that house was terminated by her own actions. Hearing it laid out so clearly, so definitively, was like a physical weight being lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't just my word against hers. It was the law. It was my father's final protective embrace. "So what do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We act," he said, his tone shifting from empathetic counsel to professional strategist. "We don't need a messy, protracted court battle. The evidence is clear. The breach is undeniable. Our first and most powerful move is to serve her with a formal notice. This isn't a letter asking her to reconsider. This is a legal document, a notice to quit. It will officially inform her that due to her breach of the trust agreement, her life estate has been nullified and she is now occupying the property illegally. It will give her a legally mandated period to vacate the premises." He paused, letting the words sink in. "This will be a shock to her, Kenna. She has likely lived for years under the assumption that the house was hers to control. This document will inform her in no uncertain terms that she is for all intents and purposes a tenant who has broken her lease, and that her landlord is now evicting her." The word evicting sent a shiver through me. It was so final, so brutal. But what she had done to Amia was brutal. What she had done to me for years was a slow, quiet kind of brutality. This was simply the consequence. Mr. Hemlock swiveled in his chair and began to type. I could see the reflection of the screen in his glasses. The language he used was a world away from the emotional turmoil of the last 24 hours. It was precise, impersonal, and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. It cited the specific article and section of the Robert Hayes Family Trust. It detailed the date of the violation, referencing the act of changing the locks and the verbal declaration of eviction. It was addressed to Ms. Patricia Hayes and Mr. Jordan Hayes and any other occupants residing at 128 Elm Street. It gave them 30 days from the date of receipt to vacate the property entirely. 30 days to undo the life they had so comfortably built at my expense. When he finished, he printed the document and turned it around for me to read. It was 1 page long, but it felt as heavy as a tombstone. It was the death certificate of my family as I knew it. Mr. Hemlock looked at me, his kind eyes searching my face. "Kenna, I need to ask you one more time. Are you absolutely certain this is the path you want to take? Once we send this, there is no going back. The bridges will be burned." I didn't even have to think about it. I saw my daughter's face pale and streaked with rain. I heard her small, shivering voice over the phone. I felt the cold indifference of my mother's gaze as she stood in the warm, dry doorway. There were no bridges left to burn. They had already turned them to ash. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I'm certain." He nodded slowly, a look of solemn understanding on his face. He placed the notice into a crisp legal envelope. "Very well," he said. "I'll have this sent by certified mail this afternoon. She'll have to sign for it herself. They won't be able to claim they never received it." I walked out of that law office and back into the gray afternoon. The air felt different. The weight on my shoulders hadn't vanished, but it had changed. It was no longer the crushing weight of helplessness. It was the heavy, solid weight of a decision made. A line had been drawn. A battle had been declared. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel victorious. I felt like a general on the eve of a war she never wanted to fight, but knew she had to win. I got in my car, and for the first time in 2 years, I knew exactly where I was going. I was going to fight for my home. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. We stayed at the Sleepy Hollow Motel, creating a small routine in our temporary world of faded wallpaper and thin walls. I found a local park where Amia could play, and a small diner where the waitress learned our order by the second morning. I spent hours at the motel's wobbly desk, working on my client's coffee logo, the focused task a welcome anchor in the swirling sea of my emotions. Every time my phone buzzed with an unknown number, my heart would leap into my throat, but it was never them. The silence from the house on Elm Street was absolute, a heavy, looming quiet before a storm. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel the sharp, satisfying thrill of revenge. Instead, a profound and heavy calm had settled over me. It was the calm of a captain who has pointed her ship into the heart of a hurricane, knowing the journey would be brutal but necessary to reach the other side. This wasn't a game of spite. It was a fight for survival, for my daughter's right to a stable home, for the memory of a father who had tried to protect me. I would watch Amia sleep at night, her face relaxed and innocent, and I knew with a certainty that reached down to my very bones that I had made the only choice I could. I was a mother protecting her child. There was no room for doubt. On the third day, I imagined the mail carrier making his usual rounds. I pictured his truck stopping in front of the familiar 2-story house with its manicured lawn and rose bushes my mother was so proud of. I saw him walking up the stone path, a certified letter in his hand, a document that looked official and important. A document that required a signature. The scene played out in my mind with vivid clarity. My mother, Patricia, would have opened the door, a look of mild annoyance on her face at being disturbed. She would have signed for the letter with a flourish of her pen, perhaps assuming it was something for Jordan's business. I could see her carrying it into the kitchen, placing it on the granite countertop where she'd often leave passive-aggressive notes for me. Jordan would probably be there sipping coffee, scrolling through his phone, complaining about the stock market. I imagined her slitting the envelope open with a butter knife, her expression one of detached curiosity. She would pull out the single sheet of paper. Her eyes would scan the formal heading, the legal letterhead of Hemlock and Associates. A flicker of confusion. Then she would start reading. I could almost hear the words in my mind, the cold, impersonal language of the law stripping away her power sentence by sentence. Notice to quit. Violation of the terms of the Robert Hayes Family Trust. Breach of the life estate agreement. 30 days to vacate the premises. The self-righteous certainty that she wore like a suit of armor would begin to crack. Her confident posture would falter. The letter would start to tremble in her hand. Her breath would catch in her throat. This was impossible. This was a mistake. A joke. Kenna. Her weak, sentimental daughter who relied on her for a roof over her head. The daughter she had so easily dismissed, so thoroughly controlled. This couldn't be happening. I pictured her looking at Jordan, her eyes wide with a dawning horror, a panic she hadn't felt in decades. "What is this?" she would stammer, thrusting the paper at him. Jordan, ever the pragmatist, would read it more quickly. His own arrogance would dissolve just as fast, replaced by a stark bottom-line terror. This wasn't a joke. This was real. This was a legal document. 30 days. The words would feel like a death sentence to the life they had built, a life funded by my father's legacy and secured by my silence. His face would pale. He would look at our mother, and for the first time, he would see not a powerful matriarch, but a woman who had made a catastrophic, life-altering mistake. And then the collapse. The full weight of the consequences would crash down upon Patricia. The house wasn't hers. It had never truly been hers to control. Her authority, her power, the very foundation of her identity, had been a conditional privilege, and she had just set it on fire with her own two hands. The world she had so carefully constructed, where she was the queen and everyone else were merely subjects, was imploding. The strength would leave her legs. The letter would flutter from her nerveless fingers to the pristine tile floor. A gasp, a cry, a sudden complete surrender to the overwhelming shock as her body gave out and she slumped to the ground. She hadn't fainted from weakness. She had collapsed from the sheer crushing weight of justice. The call came that evening. Amia was asleep, and I was staring at the blank motel room wall, the imagined scene still replaying in my mind. When my phone lit up with Jordan's name, I felt no surprise, only a weary resignation. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, taking a deep, steadying breath. "Hello, Jordan." His voice was a ragged, panicked explosion in my ear. "What did you do?" He yelled, his usual smooth confidence completely gone, replaced by the raw panic of a cornered animal. "What in the world did you do? Kenna?" I remained silent, letting him expend his initial burst of fury. "Mom is a wreck. She read your letter and she just collapsed. We had to call the doctor." She fainted. Her heart. "Kenna, what if you've given her a heart attack? Is this what you wanted, to kill your own mother?" The accusation was so absurd, so transparently manipulative, that I felt a cold calm settle over me. "Is she okay?" I asked, my voice even. "Is she okay?" he screeched, his voice cracking. "No, she's not okay. You just served her with an eviction notice. You're throwing your own mother out of her home. How could you be so heartless, so cruel, after everything she's done for you, for your daughter? We took you in. We gave you a place to live." "You didn't give me anything, Jordan," I said softly, the words sharp and clear. "You tolerated me in a house my father left for me. It's her home," he insisted, his desperation growing. "She's lived there for 40 years. You can't do this. You're tearing this family apart. You're destroying everything." That was it. That was the line. The hypocrisy was so staggering it was almost breathtaking. I took a slow breath, holding the phone slightly away from my ear. The rage I felt was no longer hot. It was glacial. It was the calm, absolute certainty of a judge delivering a verdict. "The family was already destroyed, Jordan," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion, except a profound, unshakable finality. "It was destroyed the night you stood in a warm hallway and watched your 11-year-old niece shiver in a cold, dark rainstorm for 5 hours. It was destroyed when our mother locked the door on her own grandchild and felt nothing. You didn't just lock out a child, you locked out any possibility of this being a family." I paused, letting the truth of my words hang in the heavy silence between us. I could hear his ragged breathing on the other end of the line. "I am not destroying anything." I continued, my voice as steady as a rock. "I am building a home for my daughter from the wreckage you both left behind. A safe home, a warm home, a home where the locks are never changed on family. You have 30 days. And with that, before he could form another accusation, another pathetic plea, I ended the call. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand, my hand perfectly steady. The storm had finally broken, and I was still standing. The first call came less than 24 hours after Jordan's panicked outburst. It wasn't him, and it wasn't my mother. It was my Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister. Her tone was syrupy sweet, dripping with a feigned concern that set my teeth on edge. "Kenna, honey, it's Aunt Carol," she began, her voice oozing sympathy. "I just heard the most awful news. Your mother is simply beside herself. We're all so worried about her. Her heart isn't what it used to be, you know. The shock of all this, it's just too much for her." I listened silently, holding the phone away from my ear. I could picture her perfectly sitting in her chintz armchair, a cup of tea steaming beside her, playing the part of the family peacemaker. "Honey, I know you're upset," she continued, "but you can't let a little family squabble escalate like this. Your mother loves you. She loves that sweet little Amia. Maybe she was a little harsh, but throwing her out of her own home, it's just not right. You need to think about what you're doing to this family. You need to forgive." The word forgive hung in the air. Forgive what? Forgive the deliberate act of locking an 11-year-old child out in a storm for 5 hours. Forgive the years of emotional attrition. Forgive the cold, dead look in my mother's eyes as she shut the door on us. My aunt wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for my surrender. "Aunt Carol," I said, and I was surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "I appreciate you calling, but this is no longer a family matter. It's a legal one." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Legal, Kenna? Don't be so dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic," I replied, my tone leaving no room for argument. "My decision has been made, and it is final. If you, Mom, or Jordan have anything further to say about this situation, you need to direct all communication to my lawyer, Mr. Hemlock. I will not be discussing it further." I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she processed this new unyielding version of her niece. "Well, I never," she finally sputtered. "I was only trying to help." "Thank you, but I don't need that kind of help," I said, and before she could launch into another guilt-laden monologue, I ended the call. My hand was shaking, but my heart was steady. The first boundary had been drawn. The next wave came 2 days later, this time from my Uncle Mike Jordan's godfather, and a man who believed my brother could do no wrong. His approach was a full frontal assault. "Kenna, what the hell do you think you're playing at?" He barked into the phone, foregoing any pretense of a greeting. "I've known you since you were a baby. I never took you for a cold-hearted, ungrateful brat. Your mother gave you shelter, and this is how you repay her, by trying to make her homeless. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You're tearing your family apart over a little spat. Whatever it was, get over it. Apologize to your mother and stop this nonsense right now." The hot shame he was trying to ignite in me simply wouldn't catch. The embers were dead. "Uncle Mike," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake, "this is a legal matter now. If you have any concerns, please direct them to my lawyer." "Don't you give me that legal nonsense," he roared. "This is about family." "No," I corrected him. "This is about what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. Please don't call me again about this." I hung up before he could respond. I immediately blocked his number, then Aunt Carol's. It was a small act, but it felt monumental. It was me taking back control. For the next 2 weeks, the siege continued. I received texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, voicemails from old family friends, all carrying the same tune. I was selfish. I was cruel. I was destroying Patricia's life. Each message was a new attempt to breach my defenses, to find a crack in my resolve. But there were no cracks. With each call, I ignored. With each text, I deleted the walls I was building around myself, and Amia grew taller and stronger. I explained to Amia that we were having some grown-up disagreements with Grandma, and that we needed our own quiet time for a little while. Her simple, trusting acceptance of my words was all the validation I needed. Then one evening, a call came from a number I didn't recognize, but it was a local area code. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello, Kenna. It's Sarah, my cousin Sarah. We had been close as kids' partners in crime during boring family gatherings, but we had drifted apart as adults. She hadn't been part of the barrage. Her voice was hesitant, gentle. Hey, I know everyone has been calling you. I'm not calling to do that. I promise. I wanted to hear from you. I wanted to know if you're okay." Her genuine concern was so different from the manipulative tactics of the others that it caught me off guard. For the first time, a small crack appeared in my armor. "I'm okay, Sarah. We're okay." "I don't believe what they're saying about you," she said quietly. "You're not that person. You've never been that person. I know Aunt Patricia can be difficult. And Jordan has always had her wrapped around his little finger. So please, can you just tell me what really happened?" It was the question no one else had bothered to ask. And because it was her, I told her. I told her everything. I told her about the years of quiet digs and constant criticism. And then I told her about the rain. I described finding my daughter, my voice cracking for the first time as I recounted Amia's soaked clothes and shivering body. I told her about the 5 hours. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was thick with disbelief and horror. "Oh my God, Kenna, I didn't know. No one told us that part of the story. They just said you had a fight and stormed out." She took a shaky breath. "And now it all makes sense." "What makes sense?" I asked. "The rest of it," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "The part they aren't telling anyone. Kenna, has Jordan ever talked to you about his business, his real estate investments? No, I said, just that he was a big success. Sarah let out a short, bitter laugh. A success at spending money, maybe. Kenna, he's in trouble, big trouble. My husband works at the same bank he uses. It's not public knowledge, but the rumors are everywhere. Jordan made some terrible investments. He's millions of dollars in debt. The bank is about to foreclose on his house. He's completely ruined. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. About a month ago, Sarah continued, I overheard my mom talking to Aunt Patricia on the phone. Aunt Patricia was crying, saying she couldn't let her son be humiliated like that. She said they had a plan. She said they would sell the house on Elm Street to pay off Jordan's debts. She said it was the only way to save the family's good name. The air left my lungs. The cold, hard truth of it settled in my stomach like a block of ice. This was never about me. It wasn't about my hobby of a career or my parenting or a simple lack of space. It was never a spontaneous act of cruelty born from a heated argument. It was a calculated, premeditated plan. They needed me out. They needed to get rid of the inconvenient daughter and granddaughter so they could sell our home, my father's legacy to bail out the golden child. Locking Amia out in the rain wasn't just a moment of maternal failure. It was a tactic, a cruel, deliberate maneuver designed to make me leave so they could execute their plan. The last shred of any lingering subconscious guilt I might have been harboring for my mother, for my family, evaporated in that instant. It was replaced by a pure, cold certainty. These people were not my family. They were predators who had been willing to sacrifice my child's safety for their own financial gain. Thank you, Sarah, I said, my voice eerily calm. You have no idea what you've just done for me. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet motel room for a long time. I was no longer a woman acting out of hurt and anger. I was a protector, a guardian of my father's legacy and my daughter's future, defending our home from those who saw it as nothing more than a pile of cash. I picked up my phone one last time and sent a single final text to a group chat that included every relative who had contacted me. The decision regarding the house on Elm Street is final and non-negotiable. This is a legal matter between myself, Patricia Hayes, and Jordan Hayes. Any further attempts to contact me or my daughter about this issue will be considered harassment. All future communication must be directed to my legal counsel. I then blocked every single one of them. The boundary was no longer just a line drawn in the sand. It was a fortress wall, and I was standing guard. The 30th day arrived not with a clap of thunder, but with a quiet, unnerving stillness. I woke up in the motel room before the sun, my body humming with a nervous energy that made sleep impossible. Today was the deadline. For 29 days, I had existed in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of work and motherhood, while a part of my mind was constantly counting down. I had heard nothing from them since blocking their numbers. The silence was a void, and my imagination had tried to fill it with 1,000 different scenarios. Would they refuse to leave? Would I have to call the sheriff? Would they destroy the house out of spite? I made breakfast for Amia, my hands moving with an automated calm, while my stomach twisted itself into knots. She seemed to sense the tension, her usual morning chatter replaced by a quiet watchfulness. I didn't want her to feel my anxiety, so I focused on the mundane, on the simple grounding tasks of making toast and pouring juice. Around 10 o'clock, just as I was about to break down and call my lawyer for the 10th time, my phone rang. It was Mr. Hemlock. Good morning, Kenna. His voice was calm and professional. I just wanted to inform you that I sent an associate by the property on Elm Street this morning to confirm the situation. The house is vacant. A moving truck was seen leaving late last night. The keys your mother and brother had were left in an envelope in the mailbox as instructed. The property is yours. The words hung in the air. The house is vacant. It was over. The fight, the waiting, the uncertainty. It was done. A wave of relief so powerful it made me dizzy washed over me. I sank onto the edge of the lumpy motel bed, my hand pressed to my chest. Thank you, Mr. Hemlock. I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you for everything. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long moment. Then I turned to my daughter, who was watching me with her big, perceptive eyes. I took a deep breath and gave her a smile that I hoped looked more confident than I felt. "Guess what, sweetie?" I said. "We're going home today." Amia's eyes widened. "To Grandma's house." "Not anymore," I said softly, choosing my words with care. "It's our house now, just ours." The drive back was a journey through a landscape of memories. We passed the park where my father taught me to ride a bike, the ice cream shop where Marcus and I had our first date, the corner where Amia's school bus dropped her off every day. Each landmark was a ghost of a life that no longer existed. This time, as we turned onto Elm Street, it felt different. The familiar canopy of oak trees, the neat rows of houses, they didn't feel like a cage anymore. They felt like a destination. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw the house. It looked exactly the same as it always had. The rose bushes my mother had tended with obsessive care were still perfectly pruned. The lawn was neatly cut. The windows were dark and blank, reflecting the gray sky like vacant eyes. From the outside, nothing had changed. But I knew that everything had. The silence that surrounded the house was profound. There was no car in the driveway, no wreath on the door, no sign of life at all. I turned off the engine, and for a minute we just sat there, looking at the place that held our entire history. I took the new set of keys from my purse. They were shiny and sharp, unfamiliar in my hand. Taking Amia's hand in mine, we walked up the stone path. My heart was pounding with a strange mix of trepidation and resolve. This was the same path Amia had walked alone in the rain. This was the same door that had been shut in our faces. My hand was shaking slightly as I slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. With a smooth, solid click, the lock turned. The sound was deafening in the silence, a sound of finality, a sound of transfer. It was the sound of a new beginning. I pushed the door open. The air that greeted us was cold and still. The house was hollow. The first thing I noticed was the echo. Our footsteps on the hardwood floor of the entryway, a sound that used to be absorbed by rugs and furniture, now bounced off the bare walls, loud and lonely. The entryway table was gone. The family photos that had lined the staircase wall were gone, leaving behind faint, lighter squares on the painted surface like ghosts. We stepped further inside. The living room was a cavern of emptiness. The large sofa, the armchairs, the coffee table, all of it had vanished. The only things left were the indentations in the carpet where the furniture had stood for decades. Dust motes danced in the pale light filtering through the windows. The house had been stripped not just of its contents, but of its soul. It felt like a museum, after closing hours, a hollow shell where life used to be. My mother's presence, which had once been so overwhelming and oppressive, was gone so completely that its absence was a physical presence in itself. There was no scent of her potpourri, no sound of the television from the den, no sign that she had ever lived here at all. Amia's small hand tightened in mine. She looked around the vast empty space, her expression a mixture of confusion and awe. "Wow," she whispered, her voice echoing slightly. "Where did all of Grandma's stuff go?" I looked down at her, then around the empty room. I saw not an empty space, but a blank canvas. I saw not loss, but potential. This cold, hollow house wasn't an ending. It was the raw material for our future. A deep, quiet certainty settled in my heart. She took it with her, sweetie. I said, my voice clear and strong in the echoing quiet. Because this isn't her home anymore. It's ours now. And we get to fill it with whatever we want. The first thing we did was open every single window. We let the crisp autumn air rush through the empty rooms, chasing out the stale silence and the lingering scent of my mother's resentment. It felt like the house was taking its first deep breath in years. That first weekend, we didn't move any furniture in. We just cleaned. Armed with buckets of warm, soapy water sponges and a radio blasting cheerful pop music, we started a process I came to think of as a house exorcism. We weren't just washing away dirt and dust, we were washing away the memories. We scrubbed the floors where my mother had paced while criticizing my life choices. We wiped down the countertops where she had left her passive-aggressive notes. We washed the windows that had looked out on my daughter shivering in the rain. It wasn't a chore, it was a joyful, liberating reclamation. Amia, full of purpose, scrubbed the baseboards with a dedication that made me smile. I found myself laughing, truly laughing for the first time in what felt like an eternity, when she accidentally sprayed me with a cleaning bottle. We were a team partners in building our new life from the ground up. The house echoed not with emptiness, but with our music and our laughter. The following week we painted. We covered the oppressive beige my mother had insisted on with a warm, creamy white. For Amia's room, the room that had once been my cramped shared sanctuary, she chose a bright, sunny yellow. Watching her roll the cheerful color onto the walls, her small face smudged with paint, I saw a lightness in her that had been missing for 2 years. She was no longer a guest in someone else's house. She was the queen of her own castle, and she was painting the walls the color of sunshine. We hung her drawings everywhere, turning the hallway into a vibrant art gallery of winged tigers and candy cities. We filled the empty spaces not with expensive furniture, but with our own joy and our own identity. Life began to settle into a new, peaceful rhythm. With a dedicated room for my office, a space that was truly mine, my creativity flourished. The constant tension that had been a knot in my shoulders for 2 years finally began to unwind. I could work for hours uninterrupted by my mother's critical gaze or her cutting remarks. My designs became bolder, more confident. My business, which had been a lifeline, started to thrive. The coffee company logo was a huge success, and new clients began to seek me out. I was no longer just surviving, I was building a career. The change in Amia was even more profound. Having her own space, a room she had chosen and created herself, gave her a new sense of confidence. She started inviting friends over after school, their laughter filling the rooms that had been silent for so long. The shadows of anxiety that had haunted her eyes after that terrible night in the rain began to recede, replaced by the carefree sparkle a child should have. She was happy, she was secure, she was home. One evening, about a month after we had moved back in, I stood in the doorway of her room watching her sleep. The yellow walls seemed to glow in the soft light of her bedside lamp. Her breathing was deep and even her face completely relaxed. Her new bed was surrounded by her favorite stuffed animals and piles of books. This was her sanctuary, a place where she was unconditionally loved and absolutely safe. Looking at her, the full weight of the past few months settled on me not as a burden, but as a testament to our journey. I realized then that the fight was never really about the house itself, about the wood and the plaster and the brick. My father knew that. A home isn't just a structure. It's the feeling of safety when you lock the door at night. It's the freedom to be yourself without judgment. It's the place where love is the only condition for entry. My mother and brother had tried to turn this house into a place of transaction and control, a prize to be sold to cover their own mistakes. They had fundamentally misunderstood its true value. I had fought not to punish them, not for vengeance, but to reclaim that essential human right for my daughter. I fought for her right to have a place in this world that was unconditionally hers, a sanctuary from any storm. The keys in my purse no longer felt sharp or unfamiliar. They felt warm, solid, and right. They were more than just pieces of metal. They were a promise that as long as I was there, no door would ever be locked to her again. True strength isn't found in loud confrontations, but in the quiet resolve to protect what you love. Family is not an obligation defined by blood, but a sanctuary built on respect and compassion. When that sanctuary is violated, the most profound act of love is to reclaim it, not for vengeance, but for dignity.